Cliff, 39, 40, 41. Coach Butts took over in 39, and he immediately started developing a program which peaked, unfortunately, as World War II was sort of peaking. Had it not been for World War II, I think a lot of folks thought that Coach Butts might have developed a real football dynasty. It wasn't bad as it was, but the war interrupted. What would have happened if World War II hadn't come along?
Well, you've just interviewed Leo Costa, and he was on that Rose Bowl team. All those folks had graduated and most of them had commissions or were going in the Army when they got back to Athens. As soon as they got back to Athens, they were going in the Army. As a matter of fact, I graduated in the spring of 1942, and I graduated not in uniform, but I had a uniform, and I walked across the stage, and the the president handed me a diploma and 2 or 3 more steps, and a colonel handed me a commission, and 2 or 3 more steps, and a sergeant handed me orders to Fort Benning.
Everybody went to war, and you were no exception. What was the attitude of the athletes in this country? You go from enjoying a wonderful life, campus life on scholarship, suddenly you're at war. How'd you manage?
Well, you said it. Everybody was in the war. Civilians were in the war. Everybody was in that war. And I didn't know anybody, any of my teammates or any of my friends who were not in the service somehow or other, either in the Army, the Navy, or the Marines, or what was called the Air Corps at that time. Wasn't the Air Force, it was the Air Corps. And so I don't think anybody thought poorly of having been in the service, because everybody they knew was in the service.
After the war, you chose to coach for a while, but then wasn't too long before you went into business. What prompted you to, what motivated you to go into business after coaching? You even were at Kansas. That's a pretty different experience.
Well, I coached for 2 years in high school and loved that life. I was just married at the time, and it was when the opportunity, I didn't want to leave Greenville, South Carolina. I had a good football team, very good program, was perfectly satisfied there, and but the opportunity to coach in college was just too much to pass by, and so I went out to Kansas. At the time, I didn't know where Kansas was, much less where the University of Kansas was. But we had a good time out there, and I stayed out there 5.5 years, then I went to work in a bank, which, I had grown up in that bank. My father was the president of the bank. I didn't know whether he'd let me come in there or not, but I sensed that we were not going to have too good a team the next year, and that I was going to. Kansas had a way of getting rid of their coaches if they had one bad year. And I sensed that they were going to have a bad year, and sure enough, all the coaches that I left got fired the next year. Coach Sykes, I appreciated very much Coach J.V. Sykes, who had been the end coach here at Georgia. And when he got the job at Kansas, I don't think there's any question but that he asked Bill Hartman who he would recommend, and Bill recommended me. I think that happened. Nobody ever told me that, but I don't think Coach Sykes would have hired me if Hartman hadn't recommended me.
Your freshman year, Joel Hunt was the coach in 1938. most people, and I've checked their files myself, don't know much about Coach Hunt. He only coached for 1 year. It was not a good scene, not a good time, but what was he like?
Well, I liked him very much. He was a kicker, a punter, and he liked all punters. He didn't want you to just rear back and kick the ball as far as you could kick it. He wanted to kick it to the sideline. And as a matter of fact, when you practiced with him, you practiced kicking the ball out of bounds on the 5-yard line. That was his way of practicing. I guess I was sorry that Coach Hunt left, but I wasn't sorry that Coach Butts took over. Coach Butts was his end coach. I thought that was odd. You know, end most of the time are big lanky fellas. Coach Butts was like, what, 5'4" or something like that. And I knew he had been a real tough end at Mercer University. And so it was, as a matter of fact, I played high school football 3 years, and we had 3 different coaches. And then came down here and had Joel Hunt. And so when I was a junior, 1940, was the first year I'd ever had played for 2 coaches in a row. And that was Coach Butts.
You once made an interesting quote about Sinkwich. If you made your block, he got big yardage. If you didn't make your block, he still made 6 or 8. What was that quote?
Well, I've always said if I got my block on, Frank may have gained 25 yards. If I didn't, he didn't gain but 8 or 9 or 10.
How good was Sinkwich?
If Frank had been fast, if he had been fast as Charlie Trippy, he probably wouldn't have been as good a running back as he was. But Frank was the slowest man in the backfield, but he had the first 3 steps Frank took were the quickest first 3 steps of anybody I ever knew. So he was able to overcome that slowness because 3 steps would put him by the linebackers before they knew what was happening. And when he got in a broken field, he was tough. He didn't try to dodge anybody, but he did move just enough to where you couldn't hit him with your shoulder, and you'd hit him with your arm, and he was powerful enough to almost break your arm. To tell you the truth, nobody wanted to tackle Frank twice. He was tough running back. He hurt you.